Thank you, Innovation for Policy Foundation and the team, extraordinary team that I've got to know over during the lockdown. And it's fantastic to see, just people, despite the extraordinary challenges, people are coming up with amazing solutions across the African continent. I myself joined with, half a dozen of us came together on the 1st of April to launch Support for Africa SMEs, because after having spent 5 years working across the continent, I woke up and thought my 5 years of that work in supporting African entrepreneurs and, advocating for an enabling environment across the continent was gonna be devastated as a result of the impact, not just of the health crisis, but also of the economic crisis. And Support for Africa SMEs really just set itself up to just curate and share information to begin to tell the extraordinary stories. And we're going to be meeting some amazing African heroes from across and heroines across the continent to share some of their own experiences of what they are doing in this time of the COVID crisis. And so the other is literally sharing stories of hope. It's in this time that the African entrepreneurs and the African entrepreneurship ecosystem needs their voices to be heard and for their stories to be seen. And at the same time, advocating that, there is no shortage of money and resources pouring into the continent, and the continent itself is full of extraordinary resources and assets. Its biggest asset, as far as I'm concerned, it's its human capital. And it's literally how are we going to harness that in terms of rebuilding or building or arriving at what's, people are calling the new normal. And what is the role of the African SMEs, the African entrepreneurship ecosystem and rebuilding that. And I think as the I4 policy co-creating response and recovery on COVID in Africa, and I want to read a quote from them: to survive this crisis, to rebuild our societies and to safeguard our communities in its aftermath demands that we unlock our collective problem-solving potential, our resources and our shared humanity. And that is what the thinking behind the Pan-African Digital Assembly is. I mean, and they quote, and I, quote a visionary leader, the President Paul Kagame, said Africa could take a generation to recover from this COVID-19, from the social and economic impact of this COVID-19. He calls on Africans to mobilize the right mindset rather than more funding. After all, he says, in Africa, we have everything we need in real terms. Whatever is lacking, we have the means to acquire it. I'd like to think that, as we, share our own experiences Erik, Yong from Germany, Rene Parker from Cape Town, South Africa, Bogolo, Kenewendu from Botswana, that we're moving towards how is it and what is our role going to be, those of us who champion private sector, who champion, community participation and engagement, what is our role in managing the crisis, but also in coming up with solutions post-crisis. I think before I open it up for discussion and invite my amazing panel members to introduce themselves, let me just share with you very quickly a survey that I4 Policy conducted of the MSMEs and the Ecosystem Support Organization. And literally about 530 enterprises responded to their surveys. And I think this might focus our mind in terms of our discussion. And just very quickly, 44% of the MSMEs are at risk of failure, and 40% have just enough operating capital to sustain them for the next 3 months. 74% reported losses in revenue, and 89% required capital support. It's a real, this is, we talk about the stimulus packages from across, particularly sitting in Germany, sitting in the UK as I am. We've seen how our governments have responded, but that is not universally the case across the African continent. 37% of them have had to reduce working hours for employees. 15% have had to retrench workers, and another 15% have had to reduce their pay. Overall, the survey suggests that employment fell by an average of 18% for MSMEs. Top challenges faced by enterprises include access to finance, and it'd be really good if we as a panel can begin to address that. Access to markets and business support. 98% believe that entrepreneurs, artists, and other innovators have ideas and solutions that can meaningfully contribute to the response and recovery in this pandemic. So they're not waiting for handouts, they're waiting for their intellectual capital and their solutions to be literally harnessed by the policymakers and by the government. Similarly, talking to a survey of about 169 community hubs, the survey found that 39% are at risk of failure and 34% have just enough operating capital to sustain them for the next 3 months again. 93% were actively investing in growth projects prior to the pandemic. However, 81% of them have paused them as a result. Even so, hubs continue to support MSMEs, providing technical support, training, mentorship, equipment, and space. 75% have committed funding or resources to help deal with the COVID-19. We've spoken about, they've also proposed the kinds of solutions and the kinds of interventions that they're looking for: access to finance, access to markets, and absolutely in terms of business support. I think with that as a context, and we know the global context, over 200,000 people across the globe, lives have been taken. There's been a global shutdown of the global economy. And the International Labour Organization, it's a report that they published, estimate that over 1.6 billion people, that's half the global workforce, are immediately in danger of having their livelihoods destroyed. So the context, I guess the picture is quite stark. But I also know from the work that certainly we've been doing around support for Africa SMEs, there's also a lot of hope. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs around the African continent, the 54 African countries, that are rising to that challenge with extraordinary, from farmers to health workers to educators to manufacturers. There are many entrepreneurs who are pivoting, in terms of, yes, I was producing high-end fashion, but let me produce PPE right now, yeah? I was making shoes, let me find different ways of redeploying my skills. I'm really delighted and honored that I've been invited to participate in this. And I did some research on the 3 panelists. Erik, Yong, I know, having worked with them when I was in Nigeria, but I was blown away by reading about Rene Parker and her work with RLabs. And Bogolo, Kenewendu, you just blew me away in terms of just your focus, your phenomenal achievement. And you're no older than my eldest daughter, who is 32. In fact, you're just a year older than her. So for me, it's a delight and an honor to be engaging in this conversation, because I know that you are the face of Africa, and I'm going to cry now, that you are Africa, and that, governments and policymakers and the kind of international development agencies, it's your voices that need to be heard. Okay, I'll stop. I'm going to invite Rene first to really introduce yourself, Rene, and to really tell us about what is RLabs, yeah, and how is RLabs and your extraordinary community, not just in Africa, but other parts of the world that you'll talk about, how is it managing and coping in this time of crisis? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, of course, I'm Rene Parker. My name is right there. I'm from RLabs. I'm sitting at the moment at the tip of Africa in Cape Town, South Africa. And yeah, I might be sitting here, but my heart is for Africa. We are citizens of this continent, and we all have a role to play. And for RLabs in particular, we run different programs. But our tagline is called "Making Hope Contagious," and it was really interesting. But what you shared earlier on. And for us as an organization, our first tagline was called a social revolution, because we believed that the people on the ground, we can solve our own problems. We in anyone that's suffering from whatever social ill it is, you're an expert, and you are able to solve it. And at the moment, RLabs 10 years later, we a social enterprise, and we really look at innovations on the ground and just creating spaces. So whether it's at the moment, it's really virtual spaces that we have to keep going, our virtual communities. But before lockdown, we obviously had different spaces. And the one thing that we realized is, while we're encouraging our communities to innovate and our entrepreneurs and all these different stakeholders to partake in making our world a better place, making their lives better, we realized that even once we moved over into lockdown, the greatest asset we have is people. It really doesn't matter your buildings that you bought or your whatever it is, everything that before you would think, as an organization or as a company, this is what makes us great. You know what? That means nothing. We haven't used any of our physical spaces in months, but we've continued to work, we've continued to grow, we've continued to make hope contagious. And I really believe that for all entrepreneurs and even just people that's in the ecosystem, we are resilient. And we don't need to wait for someone else to put a label on us and say, you know what, you are a change maker and you can do all these things. Every single person, to the granny in the streets that's raising her kids, every single individual has a role to play. And the only difference is, how are we allowing others to also step up and fulfill their role and their purpose? So for RLabs, it's really been an interesting journey. Of course, we look at innovations, we do different training programs, equipping people, upskilling people. We work with entrepreneurs, we run incubation programs, and we do a whole lot of things, but I think the crux of the matter is that our greatest asset is our people.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. And it'd be really good to see how you continue to harness and work with those assets. But let me go to Erik. Erik, we've known each other. You came looking for, an investable pipeline from Rene. Will you will you mute? Thank you. You came from Germany, you were from Cameroon, you were born in Germany, but you came looking for African investable opportunities. Yeah. And I know that GreenTec has been identifying, developing and growing, not just that, but certainly focusing on African SMEs. how has your portfolio of companies that you've been nurturing and supporting, how have they been impacted, and how is GreenTec supporting them? But before that, but please talk about GreenTec. What is GreenTec? Because not everybody will know.
Thank you, Parminder. First of all, for those who doesn't know about GreenTec, GreenTec is the premier investment organization in Germany in African startup. We wanted to, as you mentioned, I have a Cameroonian origin, and definitely having had an international career, I wanted to contribute to the continent and do it in a way that I believe made sense. And therefore, with my partners, Thomas Westerling, who was coming from the bank industry, we've decided to design a new investment approach that was based not only on capital allocation, but on execution support, so that we could create another kind of perception of value, commercial value, more turnover, more partners, better technology, etc. And we believe that our thesis was that there is so many African who understand the problematic that they have, but have not access to maybe the technology, maybe some of the network, and don't have maybe the opportunity to present those, that we've decided to give them resources and invest in them 5 years ago. I think since then we have invested in approximately 30 companies in 12 countries, 12 different countries, Francophone and Anglophone, East Africa, West Africa. I think that that was an incredible journey, and we had the time to really understand how innovations develop in Africa, how the business is impacted by every situation, how the entrepreneurs are fighting. And we've been always trying to improve and develop new resources, new opportunities that we can make available for those entrepreneurs. I think that when it comes to your questions, what kind of look do we have concerning the COVID and the company that we have? It's important to underline that for us, we don't want to be perceived as an investor only. We want to be perceived as a co-founder, because as a co-founder, we will be hit the same way they will be hit. And we want to be able to bring solutions at an operational level that help them to go to the next phases. And that is basically what's happening at the moment. Now, the differences before is that everybody has the same challenges. Everybody is hit by the pandemic of COVID. Everybody, the confinement has shrink the revenue of a lot of companies. And there is a necessity to develop that resilience, restructure organizations, identify new areas of development so that they can sustain until that periods, until things get better. And what we've seen is that in, let's say, 30% of our portfolio have been really hit because they've seen really their turnover going drastically down. And for them, even if there is an operational readjustment that is done, they still need to have a minimum of capital. Then we have another third part that were also hit by the Corona crisis, but because they had some assets and the operation could be implemented, or they could enhance the digital offer, or they could reallocate their operations in a way that is useful for the populations today. For them, we've seen that they've been hit, but normally they can go through. And for some of them, they will even develop new competences and new market that they haven't investigated before because the need was not there. And then we have another part which are more focused on basic needs that are becoming even more relevant, you know, access to water, development of agriculture, etc. And those companies we see are, for the moment, very more or less saved. Of course, we have to manage some challenge in terms of logistics that hits everyone. But I think that there is different. We see really different situations when we look at. And one last point is that when we look at the ecosystem of the startup in general, one thing that we find very interesting is that, you know, it is true that a lot of companies are going to lose revenue, but a lot of startup young companies, they were pre-revenue. For them, it's an adjustment, and the company that are most hit by this crisis are actually those who did succeed recently, following the support of organizations like RLabs or other incubator and accelerators, who managed to go through and that could not build that security cushion of cash so that they can go through such a crisis. And I think that those are the ones that have where I see that there's a big danger there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And we're going to come back to you and really to maybe share some examples of those 30 companies that you have in your portfolio. Maybe just highlight one or two extraordinary, you know, companies that have come up with solutions in this time. And maybe, you know, one or two companies that have really struggled as well, but actual, you know, companies from your portfolio. I'm going to turn to you, Bogolo, Kenewendu, and I apologize again if I'm really messing up. So here was the youngest minister, former minister of investment and trade and industry, an economist, a political economist, and, you know, I mean, just an extraordinary amount of experience. My immediate question to you was going to be, if you were still the minister today, what would you be? What would your 5-point plan be to support the SMEs, not just in Botswana, but a plan that can obviously be replicated in other parts of the world? I don't know if that's a wrong question, but I think, you know, it'd be fantastic to know about you. Who are you and what drives you? And, you know, to have achieved so much at such a young age and with so much more to give.
Thank you so much. And once again, it's such a pleasure to be sharing this panel with you. I am Bogolo Kenewendu, and I am from Botswana, an economist by training, and the most recent Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry till about November last year. And when I was the minister, my focus was on SME development, investment attraction, and on export development. So those were the three apexes that we were running with as a strategy at the ministry. And a specific focus, an apex on itself on SME development, because we believed with my team that we cannot talk about building an economy without focusing on support to SMEs, because that is really the base for any economy. And my passion for economics started quite young, and the stories have been told several times, and sometimes I'm a little hesitant to tell the stories. But you know, I was inspired by the former president of Botswana, Festus Mogae, who was an economist and turned politician, became the president of Botswana, the third president of Botswana. And the passion is really all up around creating policies that help people. We have seen our fair share of poverty in our spaces, and I believe that with policy done right, we can be able to affect so many people and create positive impact across not only in Botswana, but in the continent, which was really my focus. And the idea behind our strategies at the ministry during my time was more long-term vision of creating a hub for SMEs in Botswana, creating a startup capital, if you will. And you'll see a lot of the movements that we did under the SME APACs were really focused on that. And some of the things that we were focused on was making it easier to register businesses, to start up businesses, digitizing our services, enabling some of the innovation that perhaps our DFIs didn't originally want to finance, and also creating policies that can support that for the likes of the National Entrepreneurship Strategy, which, by the way, we ran a hackathon for. It was our first policy hackathon, and we engaged so many young entrepreneurs, both online, but also physically from across Botswana. And the idea was really to make policy making as inclusive as possible, to ensure that there's also buy-in, even from the smallest of businesses, micro businesses, and to inspire people to feel like they too have a role to play in the economy. And it's not only about the major multinational companies that we usually find there's a specific focus on them when it comes to FDI, and we are always pampering, rolling out the red carpet. So what we were trying to do was to also have that focus on SMEs, so they also feel like there is a red carpet that has been rolled out for them. And to bring it back to myself, I have quite argued this a few times, that it was said during my term I was the youngest minister in Africa, and I'm happy that there's Emma now at the age of 23, who we're really proud to support. But most importantly, I just think it was such an honor to serve my country. I try really hard not to make comments on what I would do as the minister, because I feel like it gives undue pressure to my successor. And but I do offer advice to those that want to listen to what I think can be done. I have followed quite closely to the interventions that have been done across Africa, policy-wise, on SME development, or even supporting SMEs. And some of the things that I would like to highlight that I am in support of, and I think can also be extended a little better, include the guarantee scheme that most governments are offering to SMEs through commercial banks. I think that is a good idea, but we need to ensure that they are properly tailored to not only serve those that have a credit record with that particular bank, but also allow some level of flexibility for your financial records to be used in order for you to tap into that. Because some of our SMEs have really just been bootstrapping their businesses. They've never gotten any credit. And if we are going to segregate them now in a time of need, then they will never fully become part of our mainstream economy. So I think retailoring our guarantee schemes that I'm seeing across Africa being put forward is very important. And the second one, during this COVID time, there are a few sectors that are going to do really well. And we, other than those, there will be a large dependency on government financing and government projects. So it's important that government make sure that there's an unbundling of projects and of procurement projects to ensure the onboarding of SMEs. Because if we're only going to be focusing on a 1.5 billion Pula tender, then we are absolutely leaving out the smaller businesses that could benefit from that. It is very crucial that we see unbundling of projects, onboarding as many SMEs to ensure that they do not collapse during this really difficult time. And of course, shortening payment delays through for those that have supplied government and those that are involved in public procurement. So those are really crucial for those that are perhaps dealing with the government. And another thing that I think for anyone that is really in business, we should be stress testing new policies and the way of doing business. I think this is the opportune time for us to push for reforms in doing business, to ensure that we are more efficient in service delivery, and we can start that new normal now and ensure that for businesses post-COVID times, that we're doing things differently, more efficient. We are digitizing our service delivery platforms. We are allowing more innovations that will assist more onboarding of sectors in the digital space. I wanted to say, you'll recall that I haven't mentioned this before. I was part of the high-level panel on digital cooperation, and
Really just picking up on, it's very interesting that we've got an investor, a community ecosystem player, and we've got someone with some, government experience, past experience, who is obviously continuing to track what the African governments are doing. Bogolo, I've gone to Rene, picking up on some of the points that you've made, and let me come back to you. We'll come back to you, yeah? Just as when we lost you, I think we've lost you again, have we? Oh, she's frozen again. So I just wondered, if you can speak on, there is a lot of these stimulus, there's a lot of schemes and initiatives, and your own government, South Africa, announced 500 billion rand stimulus package. I'm a filmmaker, and one of the things that we do as filmmakers is we follow the money. And so one of the things that I keep saying to the African SMEs is follow the money, track the money coming in, and see where it's going, particularly if it has your name on it, i.e. an African SME or an African entrepreneur ecosystem. I wonder if you can share some of your own experience of the connect or the disconnect between big announcements and their actual impact.
That's a very interesting conversation, because, well, we talk about it all the time, right? So there's definitely a disconnect. The minute the president makes an announcement on the television, and immediately in the community chat groups, people are saying all kinds of things. And it's always interesting. We all hear the same thing and everyone has a different interpretation. And of course, that's human nature. But even so, when you're talking about money and what is due to you. So yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen it with the entrepreneurs, with the businesses that we've been working with. So of course, government has made all these announcements, different things that are in play. We've also found that some of it is actually loans and it's not grants, which is also different. So I think the one thing that would be really helpful when announcements are made, that they actually put it in categories and clarify it so that there's not so much confusion on the ground and everybody thinks, oh, I'm entitled to that. And when you go through the process of actually applying, you realize, oh, wow, it's not for me. And again, as an entrepreneur and as a business, when you have overheads and you have salaries to pay and you have families that are responsible, that you feel you're responsible to, you feel the pressure. And so even in speaking to our entrepreneurs who have businesses, even if they just employ 10 or 15 people, the reality is harsh. So you're thinking, okay, I've been paying, like we have UIF as unemployment insurance fund that I've been paying to all this time, and government has said, okay, there's a relief. If you submit your documents, we will pay a portion of that. And I know many companies that have submitted it from the beginning when lockdown started in South Africa, and they're still waiting for the payout. And then it goes back and forth. Certain documents or things are not completed correctly. So there's definitely a disconnect. People's realities are definitely different for everyone, for each business and different sectors. And of course, depending on the size, depending if you've received government tenders before, if you're used to working with government, or if you've just been creating your own income, and you just reliant on sales and having people buy your products and services, and now that is not there anymore. And all of a sudden you realize, okay, now I need to look for funding, I need to pull in investment, when that was never something you had to do before. So of course, in our context in South Africa, we have a wide range of businesses and people that are actually running their businesses and or call themselves entrepreneurs. It's extremely diverse. And so it's really hard to paint everyone with the same brush and expect the same outcome for everyone. And I mean, that's just in South Africa. So imagine across the continent and then across the world, how each and every person's situation is completely different. And that's just one of the things that we realize, that it's not just simple. It's not just black and white. Everything is, if 1 + 1 won't just equal 2 in this instance. And so how do we make sure that the entrepreneurs are surviving? How do we make sure that they can still grow? Because I think it's still possible. Just because we have COVID-19 does not mean it's the end of the world. It does not mean that we're stopping. We're stopping to create, we're stopping to innovate. All of that is still happening. And so how do we pull on all of that to make it better? And of course,
what would be really good to hear is, how is RLabs, because that's where it's working in, before I come to Erik, in terms of, how, from an investor's point of view, how are the investor community having to change and become nimble in this COVID crisis in terms of how they invest? But, just to finish with you, just to finish your point, Rene, how is RLabs and the work that it's doing, how is it surviving, and how, what are some of the solutions that it's coming up with?
So if I think about how we've been operating, and of course, the beginning of the year, we had a grand scheme, right? And we had a plan. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and all of that. And we hit into lockdown, and we really, just like that, had to change everything. But of course, you don't change your mission. And for any organization, that is what grounds you, that is what keeps you. You stay true to your mission, because that's what's going to carry you through. Your activities and your programs and all those things can change. And we also realized we've always placed a high value on partnerships and relationships through all the years. And right now, those are the things that is actually helping us. So we have partners who we might not have worked with in a few, like years ago, have come back now and said, you know what, I want to do this project, I have some funding. Do you want to do it with us? Because they know us to be quite agile in shifting, in changing. And so that's something we've really seen, is the value of the relationships and partnerships that you've built up over the years. And that's not something you should really just take for granted. And I think for any organization or entrepreneur out there, you have to value those, because that's what you're going to need when things are really tough. We've also, like even our training, we normally run training programs with young people. It's called the Grow Leadership Academy, just to use that as an example, where we would have young people between 18 and 25 come in, and we would do different sessions, digital skills, entrepreneurship, leadership, training them up to be the next leaders. Of course, we can't have them in now. We also realize that most of the young people don't have internet access at home, so they don't have a computer. So when you talk about taking things online, it looks completely different for everyone. And then we had our team that runs the program. They then came up with, they changed their courses that they actually did into a WhatsApp format, and that was something we've never done before. How do you run an entire course just on WhatsApp? how do you, when you normally run into breakaway rooms and all of that, and the team really, I mean, I must commend them, you know, they came up with some amazing ideas so now, you know, and now we've used it with, we've done a program with UNICEF, they wanted us to run a hackathon with them, with young people, and we've just used WhatsApp. So nobody needed a desktop or internet connection. Most of the young people are on WhatsApp anyway. So it was definitely a medium to use, and just breaking them up into groups, making sure there's a coach able to assist them. And now we realized, okay, that works. So all our courses, we can actually offer that way, but we needed to test it. We would not have known if we didn't try it. I mean, that's just one of the examples. We have one of our innovations is called Zlato. It's our digital currency. And you do good and you earn this currency, and then you can spend it online. And because before people could go out and volunteer their time, it also builds up a work asset. So the more good you do, you're learning certain skills. And and then after a while, you have this asset. So if you're looking for a job, you have experience, because all companies want experience. But of course, people can't go out anymore. So we've had to put tasks up virtually that they can do. And just with COVID, sanitizing, washing your hands, doing certain things, putting out surveys, having them completed, because it helped us to gather data. And then they could spend it. I mean, most of the things on the store we have at the moment are e-vouchers. So they could buy electricity and they could buy airtime and data, which is a hot commodity. Everybody needs to be connected.
I mean, from listening to you, Rene, it's clear that RLabs isn't standing still, is moving even faster than it was probably before COVID. But let me come to Erik. Erik, digital transformation. I mean, there are winners and losers in this COVID crisis. There are challenges and opportunities. Clearly, the whole tech-enabled tech environment is emerging as a winner. Health tech, education tech, e-commerce, and there are many, while hospitality, while many of the other offline businesses, the tourism industry, transportation, logistics are struggling to survive. I think given that you're a green tech, that you are, really your kind of focus is on identifying tech-enabled or tech companies, and the digital transformation is being now the new gold. Just talk about the challenges of that in the context of the African continent.
Well, I think that when it comes to digital transformations, one of the biggest challenges is that even though we have very, very, very creative entrepreneurs, we still have an infrastructure problem. I heard a lot of people talking about edutech, saying that, okay, that's going to be the new, the new sectors to look at. And because of the COVID now, it's going to be even more relevant. I think that, of course, it's going to be more relevant, but it's going to be also as challenging as before, because if you have a solution and your customer cannot have access to it because they don't have internet, because it's too expensive, or whatever the reason is, then you don't have a market, you don't have an opportunity. I think that the actual situations push public organizations to make more effort to accelerate the digitalization in Africa, because we can see now that if we had already installed some of those infrastructures, then we could be more reactive. And that could be even more efficient in Africa than in Europe, because in Africa we have this capacity of being very resilient, to adapt ourselves to new solutions, and to look for alternatives that can be immediately implementable. So in that sense, I think that, of course, digitalization is a key element, but I would point out more the government to accelerate that digitalization, so that company can build on it and then create value out of it. Because it's a two-way street. Startup entrepreneurs or whatever SMEs, they can integrate all those systems, but at some point they will need to rely on very strong infrastructure. And in the other side, if the government was investing that amount of money in infrastructure, then they need to have private people, private organizations to generate value out of it, to pay taxes, and then to support at the end the economy. So that's my perspective on that.
Thank you very much. Bogolo, let me come back to you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Let me come back to you. I mean, there's a question here, particularly around, I'm not casting you as a government spokesperson because you've got an extraordinary amount of experience, but to stick with some questions around the government, because, one of the things that I'm saying again to SMEs, until now, you have tried to run in the opposite direction to the government. You've said, no, I don't want to have anything to do with government because they just slow up the process. What I'm saying to them now is that you have to run towards the government, because the government has to become your partner. They have to know your pain, and also to know that you are a solution, that you bring solutions to the table as tech entrepreneurs or any kind of other entrepreneurs. So the question here is through someone has sent a question. It seems there's a lot of well thought through government interventions, but these are highly skewed towards formal sector and formal employment. What is your opinion on this? Because the informal enterprises and the underemployed are at risk of being left behind even more. So I think that's, it's not, it's a question that's moving away from the discussion we've been having around the digital infrastructure, around, the community-based innovation hubs like RLabs. But I just thought I would put that question to you.
Thank you. And before I respond to that question, I'd like to make a few interventions related to what Erik and Rene were saying. So on the issue of the infrastructure problem, I think what we're seeing or what COVID has shown us is that ICT infrastructure is no longer just a luxury, that it is necessary for governments to invest in this infrastructure, and even for multilateral organizations to see the importance of investing in this kind of infrastructure, because at the current moment, it's estimated that only about 4% of multilateral funding goes to ICT, and only about 1% of that goes to policy making. And the beginning of this has to be that we understand the policy that is needed, and we create the policy that is needed in order to build the infrastructure that will be helpful. And what we're seeing is, going forward, in order for edutech and health tech and so forth to work, and for us to be able to roll out more, are you still there? Yes, I'm just checking. And in order for us to roll out more of these basic need services, then we absolutely need to invest in ICT. It might actually even be necessary for us to speed up this process. Innovations, I think there is also something so wonderful that's happening, and we advocated for this during the HLP, the high-level panel on digital cooperation, that we shouldn't just focus on online solutions, but we should also start thinking about online, offline solutions. And one example that I used to give all the time during those meetings was a company here in Botswana called Agri, which started a platform. You subscribe for something like 50 cents, and you have access to this platform for a month, and you can chat there with people. They share documents, they share all kinds of information of what the weather's going to look like, the kind of seeds and fertilizers that they're using. And I think a platform like that can work in several markets, can easily be scalable across Africa, but also for different solutions other than for agriculture. And I'm happy to hear that Rene and RLabs are also utilizing WhatsApp for delivery of education. And we're seeing that here. One of my nieces, her teachers have decided to offer classes via WhatsApp to benefit those that may not necessarily have internet at home. So there are various ways in which we can adapt digitization to the continent and innovation to the continent in a way that we know will be able to serve the bulk of our citizens. And on the issue of informal sector and underemployed, I mean, this is such a very big gap. It's a glaring gap in any intervention across the continent. And one of the issues is that, actually not an issue, let me focus on the solution. One of the things that I think we can do is to start a registration of the informal sector via USSD codes that we know everyone in the continent, particularly because we have very high mobile connectivity, that you just have people register what their business is, where the location was. And for countries like us that have a little bit more of a structured sector, then you can cross-check with the councils if indeed those people that have registered have been in those areas. And I hate to say it as an economist, we do not like that helicopter cash deliveries should ever be a solution. But in this time, we're seeing it happen across the world, and it's going to put a lot of fiscal pressure, yes, on the African economies. But if we don't make an intervention now, then we will have no economy to speak of in the next year or two, and it will take certainly a long time for us to recover. I was looking at some of our data here in Botswana, in Namibia, and in Zambia, and we're looking at approximately one third to half of the population that has been surviving on daily earnings, and with the lockdowns, they do not have those earnings. And these people have been used to being independent of government, feeding themselves. And if we do not make an intervention, then we are only going to, for a more long-term, burden the government with social welfare programs. And it's better for us to feel the hit now, and to have a pressure on our fiscus now, rather than more continued burgeoning social welfare budgets later.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm sitting in the UK, and it was interesting yesterday. The Chancellor announced the extension of the furlough scheme, which is literally enabling small and medium businesses to continue retaining their workforce, but that it's billions of pounds being spent now, but it's actually going to serve the long-term interest. And that's the kinds of interventions you talk about, which is actually take the risk now, because the long-term consequences are much, 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 much tougher. I don't know how much more time we have left, but I thought maybe I'd just throw one question. But actually, Erik and Rene, do you want to come back to some of the points that were made around, that Bogolo has just raised? Do you want to comment on those or comment on each other's?
Yes, I would like to add something on the fact that what I see on the COVID is that it's enhanced the need for every kind of organizations to work together. We see that, like you mentioned, there was always this question of startups saying that go away from everything that concerns the government. But we see that if we want to go through, we need to somehow build the future. We need to build it together. And I think that it also starts at the level of smaller company, SMEs, so that they have to try to work with others SMEs, because depending on the region, depending on the technology, depending on the market, there's some synergy that exists today that are not used. And I think that if we are able to move toward that directions, have a value chain approach where we can put logistic companies in one country with an agribusiness company in another countries, and those are small companies, and they manage to create more value on the common value chains, then we're going to be able to go to that crisis with a better economic dynamic. I think that this is what I would like to keep from being very important in the context of COVID.
I also just want to add to that. I love what you were saying now about building together, you know, and for a long time, most of the time, everybody thinks when you're in business, it's about competing. But there's no time to be competing against each other anymore. It is about collaborating. It's about working together. It's even about co-creating, you know, coming up with new things together, because that's the only way we are firstly going to get through this. And secondly, to leave something behind for the generations to come. Remember, we are here at this moment in time, everyone that is alive and that's adding to the economy, we all have a role to play right now. But in a few years' time, we are no longer here. The generation after us is still going to be around. And what are we going to leave behind? What stories do we want them to be saying about us? You know, that when our country went through COVID, this is what our leaders did. This is what people in business did, and that's why we can survive. And I think, you know, we have a chance to write our own story now. So whatever we are doing at this moment is we're making a mark. I mean, not just making a mark for us, we are making a mark for the generations to come, the little kids that are 5, 6 years old now, that or 8, 10 years old, that have to do school from home and don't understand why there's such a thing as homeschooling. Whatever we are doing, building the economy, keeping things going, creating new versions even of ourselves, we are doing it for them. And so, we definitely need each other. We need to work across, I think, and that's what we see. More people are more open with the ideas, are more open with what's worked for them and what hasn't worked. And I think that's really an exciting thing to see that, you know, COVID-19 is a terrible thing. People are losing their lives and the economy is going down. People are losing their jobs, and that's the reality. But on the other end, we are seeing more people working together that necessarily would not have worked together. And so we're giving ourselves a chance to contribute to that, and at least to be part. And yeah, we're hoping for the best, and we're hoping that the generations to come will be proud of the decisions we make now and the choices we make and the effort that we are putting in. And that's it from me.
Thank you so much. I mean, none of us ever thought that I never thought that in my lifetime, and I'm 64 years old, that I would live through a pandemic. Yeah. And it is a universal wake-up call as to, you know, this was, I mean, I don't want to go back to something that, you know, going back to the normal was clearly not good. It was not the right normal. And it's like, what's the new normal? And what, you know, how I don't know, it's almost like a kind of, you know, from our new mindsets and our new consciousness and our new awareness and our new enlightenment and understanding, what kind of a world do we want to create? I have 2 questions that I'm going to throw out, you know, again, from people listening to this discussion. And thank you to everyone who has joined in participating in this discussion. So question 1, as digitization is the biggest priority for African SMEs resilience, it comes with the risk, I mean, here we go, cybersecurity issues. Can you please share your ideas regarding how African governments can do in terms policies or even building an infrastructure for around security, I guess, around cybersecurity. Erik, do you want to take that question? Because I have another one for the other, yeah?
Yes, yes. So regarding cybersecurity, of course, I mean, like there is, you know, there is a risk. There is a risk in that sense. But I also think that, you know, we are not starting digitalization. There is others area that have been moving forward digitalization and have been implementing such an infrastructure, and they have managed to put in place security system that are working, and that I think that can be implemented and implement in as well in Africa. So that's why I think that it can eventually be the development of cybersecurity, you know, economy or business in Africa. But I don't see it as being a major problem. I think that there's already a strong interest in terms of protecting data from the users. Is already, you know, it's starting to get developed. Intellectual property, data. I mean, all the companies I'm working with are very, very well aware in terms of the value of the data they have. So I don't see that as a major challenge, and I believe that government are aware of it.
I guess really maybe the question is, you know, we've talked about the challenges. We're talking about what, you know, the different initiatives and incentives. I mean, the, you know, activities that the African governments are putting in place. I think the you know, I mean, maybe all three of you actually really address this question of how do the African SMEs begin to engage with the governments. We certainly, Bogolo talked about procurement, you know, government funding in terms of procurement, the guarantee schemes, you know, from the banks. But I'm also more, you know, and also talk about, you know, one of the things that I noticed across the African continent was the value chains across many of the sectors went out of your country. You know, a lot of the raw materials left the country. The capital flight out of many of those countries was extraordinary. When I arrived in Botswana, I was amazed that De Beers had been made to come and set up the processing of the diamonds. The diamonds were coming out and they were now being made to process it. So people were being made to fly into Botswana in order to look at the diamond, buy them, whatever. I.e., where there are employment opportunity in that supply chain, whether it's technology or not. Even I notice how even though many countries have amazing ICT software developers, hardware developers, still companies, the corporations and the big business would outsource their work to China, to India, or to wherever. I think the big challenge post-COVID is how is Africa going to bring back the manufacturing hubs, the value chain across many of these sectors into the continent, which are the source of employment. Shall we go with Bogolo first?
Okay, thank you again. So just a quick one on security, cyber security. I once again want to recommend that people look at the high-level panel on digital corporations report, because it has a whole segment on digital trust, security, and stability. Amongst other things, there's another issue on human rights. So I think you might find it a worthwhile read. And then there are currently a lot of consultations that are happening, and you could potentially also jump on some of those consultations, which are regularly published on the Twitter and Facebook pages for the high-level panel on digital cooperation. And on this particular question, so I think that we have a bit of a challenge as African economies, and we need to be bolder. We need to make bold decisions that will be able to serve us better and to get us through this particular period. And one thing that I want us to note is that there will certainly be less FDI for us to focus on going forward, because every country is facing this particular issue of a very harsh economic crises and a clash. And so this idea that we have to find foreign direct investment much more precious than domestic investment really will be challenged during this period. And so we need to give more incentives to domestic investment, to those that might have money in the banks, in order for them to support our SMEs and our sectors. Local productive capacity is certainly becoming more important during this time, and building our own regional value chains, whether it's in SADC or the African value chains, will also be really important. Once again, I think we should never waste a crisis, and this crisis should also be used to try to stress test the African free trade the African free trade area agreement. Let's see if it will work. Let's start working on building those value chains. How can African countries start to be more dependent of each other rather than of the world? As you know, trade between China and ourselves, or with the US, is starting to go down. How can we be more supportive of each other? And are we more willing now during the crises to partner up and to cooperate? So again, let's stress test what we've been working on for so many years. I mean, the SADC free trade area has really been in place for over 20 years almost. And you know, we still do not have any increment in our regional trade as we should. So I'm hoping that we will see some of that positive movement in that regard. But really what it will need is government reforms in doing business, in trading across borders, in also R&D. Another thing that this crisis has shown us is that African countries do not invest in R&D, and we just find that it's something that we will invest in later, because again, it has no consequence in the short-term political life that usually we have. But we're seeing that it's important, and there could be a benefit to focusing in these particular areas.
Thank you so much. You covered so many areas. Rene, what's your thoughts?
I really love, I mean, I definitely agree with everything you just said now. That was really interesting. I've been nodding my head all the time. So of course we felt it immediately when our borders were shut. You know, and we realized, oh my goodness, we rely so much on outside trade, and that we need to trade. And definitely this crisis has forced us to stop and to take stock of where do we place our priorities, and where do we place the value. You know, it's only you normally place value on things that you would feel, oh, it gives me a return on investment. And because we haven't done that much on, especially on the continent, or even if we close it a little smaller in our countries, like what can we manufacture ourselves? What can we supply ourselves? And we've always just gone for, oh, it's cheaper to import it. You know, that's always been our thing. And for many entrepreneurs that's selling goods, you find, oh, no, where do you put a shipment to come in because I'm importing it, it's cheaper. And now our borders are shut, and so we can't import, you know. And what are we doing? And that's why for many of us, I mean, especially in our context, we were a few weeks into lockdown before we realized, okay, we should make our own masks. You know, we have factories that used to make other goods before, that can actually be turned into places, because they still have sewing machines, they still have people that can stitch and the fabrics and all those things. So why don't we just make our own PPE, you know? And there's been many of those instances, even just with sanitizers. I mean, immediately those were the things that flew off the shelves. It was the hardest things to get. And now more people are realizing, okay, this is a solution that I need, and I can make it, and I can bottle it, I can label it and package it. And these are the things that I can trade with. And so it's been really good to see where we've placed the value on, and especially moving. Well, I don't know, the talks have been that at least for the next year or so, you know, we have to look at how we're going to start trading. But I think it's really good that we are able to see now what we are really made of, you know. And even with the free trade agreements, I definitely love that, you know. Our countries have signed these documents, and we've been waiting to see, okay, are we using it, are we not using it? And so even as the borders open up slowly or fast, we're not sure how that's going to happen exactly, but it will be really good to see how we start trading with each other, and actually all these agreements and treaties and things that have been in place for years, why are we not using it? So.
Couldn't agree with you more. I just want to share a couple of stories. I remember arriving in Botswana and finding that the entrepreneurs, this is when I worked with the Tony Elumelu Foundation, met with the entrepreneurs doing extraordinary things with amazing solution. The Botswana Innovation Hub was one of the places which, thanks to you and in your previous life, Bogolo, that you had actually supported the birth of. But then to my amazement, I found, they said, oh, we're just hosting entrepreneurs from Rwanda. I said, what do you mean you're hosting them? He said, yeah, you know, we met them and we've talked to them. And this was, again, Tony Elumelu entrepreneurs who'd gone through the program. And so they had been invited by them to Botswana. And here were these guys now beginning to build businesses together and beginning to collaborate and cooperate. And then the same lot said, we are now, you know, the Botswanans, we're now going to Mali, in fact, and host them. And then when I was in Rwanda and I found the Rwandans were now hosting the entrepreneurs from Botswana. But each time the numbers got bigger and bigger, the networks got bigger and bigger. And that, you know, for me was intra-Africa trade in action, stimulated and activated by African SMEs looking to, you know, yes, you know, while you guys are waiting for the ink to dry on these agreements, we're gonna start doing and laying the kind of, I guess, the framework and the infrastructure for actual trade to take place. So I just wanted to share that. Erik.
Well, I definitely agree with what everybody said, and I think part of our investment thesis for us, we always say that the biggest market for our companies it's Africa, and we haven't really mastered it. But when you look at the demographic, when you look at the need that's gonna have the continent, a need that our companies can fulfill. For me, we are our best. We are our best partner.
Can you also share a little bit about, you know, the portfolio of companies that GreenTec is supporting? What are some of, you know, what are some of the amazing solutions or products and services of those companies? Because it's important to talk about real SMEs as well.
Well, we have several companies in agriculture. We have invested in platform to facilitate transactions between smallholder farmers and big buyers. We have invested also in logistic recently with Amitruck. We have invest in also in mobility in Mali, where this is one of the cases where we had to readjust the activity in order to create a new revenue stream due to the COVID, moving a fleet of motorcycle taxi and turn it into a fleet of food delivery network. We also have invested in producer of high protein animal food, because we see that as being the future. What we're trying to do is that we're trying to invest in organizations that could facilitate, that could make more efficient, all the frictions that we can see in the different value chains, and that is for us one of the core. And that's why, for example, we're looking at investing in companies that can provide refrigeration solutions, because we know that in the agriculture supply chains we have a lot of we have a lot of loss, and that is one of the biggest challenge that we meet in that sectors. So those are kind of companies. So in terms of name of company, we have invested in Coliba. Coliba is a company who is collecting plastic in plastic. They're doing that in Côte d'Ivoire and now soon in Senegal, and they recycle it. I've mentioned the high protein animal companies, Ekududu in Kenya. We have invested in fertilizer companies in Benin, Biofito. So we also looking at, in terms of tomorrow, in terms of digitalizations, in terms of employment, because we have invested. We've been a little bit beyond our comfort zone. We have invested into online HR solutions that is located in Morocco, but was expanding in Africa, because what we see is that we need to understand what's happening now, but we need to prepare the future, and we're trying to find companies in Africa that have solutions that will help to accelerate the exit of the crisis. I think that's basically what we're trying to do, and we always try to do it thinking in terms of what kind of synergy we can develop between the different companies we have in our portfolio. So we make, for example, our logistic companies work with our fertilizer companies, etc., so that because they have an interaction, and we try to develop that culture of synergy between the companies to create more value.
Thank you very much. Amazing. So I have one more question from, I think it's from Nigeria. Hello, everyone. This is a very interesting discussion. My name is Faya Williams, Director of Partnerships Innovation Support Network, ISN Hubs, Nigeria. A number of our members have risen to fill the supply gap with innovative products. My question to the panelists is, considering the need for speed and efficiency to restart our supply chains, can we have development institutions engaging with them directly and help them scale? I think Rene and obviously Bogolo, you can both take that question, but Erik, feel free to come in. But Rene, do you want to take that question? Oh, sorry, why am I trying to click?
Thank you for the question. Hello to Nigeria. My recommendation would definitely be for any of the members in your community to actually join innovative hubs that are already there, because that would probably be the easiest way to get exposure and to hear about what the different opportunities are. I mean, there's on the RLabs network, on the I for Policy, website. We have all these hubs that are actually around, and I would encourage, this is not the time to be shy. This is not the time to be afraid to ask for help and to put your name out there. You'll be surprised how many people are prepared to help. The internet is an amazing tool and it's accessible to us all. I would encourage anyone, find out what is happening in your country, in your region. Yeah, I mean, that would be my advice. Things are moving fast. I definitely agree with you. Speed and efficiency is there. And so we have all these companies that are actually changing or pivoting, and we don't want to miss out. And this is definitely the time, like join forums like this, webinars, anything that's out there that people are where people are engaging and talking. I would encourage anyone, be part of something. Don't wait for someone to invite you to join a network or to, yeah, put yourself out there and just don't be afraid to ask for help.
And if join what already exists and start, because now is the time to also begin to really, bring ideas and solutions into the foray. Pete, can you also take that question?
Gladly. Mine is just to recommend that our SMEs, they start lobbying, that they learn how to lobby, and that they realize this power of a collective response and a collective demand. And this is how many times you find that the needs of bigger companies are met, because they usually have an organization that they are lobbying through, and they come with very detailed and outlined requests or demand from government. So that is really my recommendation. And another one is be active in your governance. And many people think government is about being the politician. No, governance is a multi-sectoral. It definitely needs the private sector to be active, especially the SMEs, who are the bulk of our economy, and that needs to really start to realize the power that they have in developing the country and in swaying policies.
I could not agree with you more in terms of SMEs learn to lobby and learn and become active in your government. I think the other area that I find, and having seen this universe called the DFIs, the development finance institutions from the World Bank, IFC to Pan-Africa and the Africa Development Bank through the Africa Union, that the African SMEs also need to begin to do exactly that, which is to become actively engaged with those institutions, whether it's the European Union, European Fund, all of these agencies that have an interest in across the African continent. And over the last 5 years, I saw how from humanitarian organizations like the International Red Cross to GIZ in Germany, the development funds, how they began to embrace entrepreneurship as a development tool. It's really critical that SMEs, the African SMEs, don't let that die, but actually now become proactively engaged in shaping the agenda going forward. I don't know. Does anybody else want to add to the points that have just been raised? Learn to lobby, be actively engaged.
Yes, one thing, I think that because this pandemic is global, European countries, US countries are going to also have to look at themselves. And therefore, I think the best lobby we can do is to show efficiency in terms of results that are provided by the SMEs and in terms of development of the continent. Because of course, when there is more selections, then people are looking at what works, where there is development, where there is job creations, where there is sustainability. And I think that the only way the best way to lobby in that direction.
Absolutely, totally agree. You know, it's also a time for the SMEs to become much, much more effective and efficient in terms of the development and the deployment of their products and services. Rene?
I think everyone else definitely mentioned it, and yes, for the SMEs, this is your time. You know, I think there's never been a better time to say it. I've always wanted to say that. But for SMEs, this is your time. And I love Feo that just commented that, yes, you know, we will increase our capacity and lobbying. And I think that's the best advice to give any SMEs at this moment, is that this is your time. And of course, we're not just saying everything is going to be rosy and beautiful and perfect. Of course not. Anyone that's an entrepreneur knows that, you know, life goes like that. And that's just the reality. And that's part of what makes us unique and what makes the ride really interesting. So to all the SMEs out there, really, you know, everything that you believe in and that you really, that carries you from day to day when everyone else says, what business are you doing? And it doesn't make sense. And you're the only person that believes in this. Those are the things that's going to keep you going during this time. And whether it is now engaging in a different way, whether it is changing what you thought you wanted to do, you know, and now what I mentioned in the beginning of the talk was your mission. Don't forget your mission. Don't forget the values that you set aside and from the beginning, from the start of your business, you know, those, because that is what's going to keep you going. And even for those that are starting out, I know we one of the issues that we're currently facing with, you can't register a new business now during this time. You know, some of the businesses that were just informal traders, and we tried to get them registered, and we were told that the department that works with that, they are not functioning in that at the moment, you know. And again, we were like, okay, so this is the, you know, people have been trading as sole proprietors and doing certain things, and now we want to get them registered and have certain papers so that they can apply for government grants or different things, and now we can't do that. And so even, you know, there's these things that you don't think is actually going to be a barrier, and it is. But I would just encourage everyone, you know, even if you're not registered yet, but you've been doing things on your own, and you realize, you know what, there's real potential here for me, and I actually want to get formalized, and you're not able to for whatever reason, don't give up. You know, it's your tenacity and your ability to hang in there during this time, you know, that's what's going to make your business still be around in a good couple of years from now.
Are there any other, any more additions to the thoughts following from Rene? Anybody else want to come in?
Right. I take it these are last words. And my last words are just that for every sector, whether you're government, private sector, communities, we need to be bolder in the decision making, in the actions that we take. We cannot, I know that we like to say that this is business unusual, it's not business as usual, but it really applies this time. It really does, and it demands that we think differently, we think more long term, but start working now in the short term, but we will not reach a different level of growth, of development, of SME successes if we're going to continue with the pre-COVID kind of mindset. We have to be bolder, and we have to make the change. Thank you.
I think, is he frozen? Erik, can we hear as your closing words, advice, challenge to African SMEs?
Wow. Advice, challenge. Well, I think that actually in the actual situation, Africa is better prepared because we already had such a crisis before. we and I think that I like this sentence where we say that where the focus goes, energy flows, and because we already had this kind of situations. When I talk to some entrepreneurs, they at some point they talk to you about the COVID, but then after they start to focus on terms of what can I do, how can I develop, how can I find myself, my way out, because that's how it is in Africa. And that's why I think that I like what Bogolo said, that we need to focus on what's happening now. We need to forget about also only the post-COVID mindset, because this is what I've allowed Africa to be resilient before. And so I have more confidence. I think that African continent is more suited for the actual situations. And of course, there is the health system issues, but this is a perspective that we have integrated in Africa, and we're still trying to move forward despite that. So that's just what I wanted to say.
And I want to say thank you so much. I've had the pleasure of meeting, I'd met Erik before, two extraordinary women doing extraordinary things across the African continent. And I just hope that we will meet in the very near future where we can actually hug each other. But from here, I send you a big hug to all three of you. And in terms of all that you've shared and all the hope that you have and that you've instilled in, across the continent, people listening into this conversation, that the power, that the lifeblood of Africa and the African continent is and are and will be the African SMEs and individuals and extraordinary people like yourself. So thank you for this privilege and honor to engage with you and to have you share your amazing life experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Parminder.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And you've also been an incredible host. So thank you for the way you've given us this platform. And it was nice to meet you all.
Definitely nice to meet you.
And I'd like to invite Ivan to come back and do whatever he has to do now to shut us out. See you in Botswana, see you in Cape Town, see you in Germany.
See you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. You were fantastic. I can definitely assure you that our Facebook and our audience was very engaged, and they really enjoyed the conversations on how SMEs can be supported throughout this pandemic. And I'd like to thank a lot our very own Parminder Veer, our session host. Thank you so much for leading on this. So we've enjoyed it all. So just one announcement is that to our audience that is following us on live, we'll go live again in exactly 1 hour, where we will host a conversation on the role of international community, and we will welcome the CEO and Executive Director of Enabel, the Belgian Development Agency. Thank you very much all, and with this we're going to end the live session. Thank you so much.